All right, so we are here today. I'm here with Greta Aurora to talk about the latest interesting development in the Marilyn Manson case, which is that Evan Rachel Wood has done a podcast, and the first episode is just made available. The podcast is called A Little Bit Culty, and it's hosted by two former members of the Nexium group. Now, I know Nexium, it is an antacid, but apparently it is also the group that's featured in the HBO documentary The Vow. That's a whole other conversation, but the point is two of the former members of this group, this Nexium group, they started this podcast that is devoted to exploring cult-like activity in our world and interviewing people who have had either cult experiences or cultish experiences. And therein lies the rub, as we're going to see. So, anyway, Greta, did you want to start us off?
Well, my first observation is that I really don't think Evan Rachel Wood came across very well in this podcast. And this is only part one that we've heard so far. I think part two is coming out next week or in a few days. I just didn't think this was the right platform, the right sort of framing for her story, because they were trying so hard to find parallels with cults, And I just kind of think that the whole thing about referring to her relationship with Manson and other women's relationships with him as cult-like, that kind of seemed like more like a throwaway comment she made while they were filming the Phoenix Rising documentary. And then they turned it into a little segment within the documentary, like a 10-15 minute segment where they tried to frame some of those experiences along those lines, and especially compare Manson's fans to cult members, people who are obsessed with cult leaders, which is just, it is a kind of a lazy thing to do, because any celebrity, any musician, any entertainer who's famous to a serious degree is going to have devoted fans. You can obviously, if you're hard pressed to do that, you can find parallels with cults, like with everything, obviously. But I just didn't think this was a very good framing, because they were really struggling to find any any palpable parallels.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to ask you something, because I'm really undecided about this. So I was actually thinking that, do they have a point about some of the fans maybe going after these women a bit too hard? And an emotion to me that keeps coming up when I listen to some of these interviews, and even when I listen to Evan Rachel Wood, I feel genuine pity for her and for the others as well. So I've just been wondering whether we should maybe approach these women with a bit more empathy, which is obviously a difficult thing to do, knowing what we know, the evidence, and like, how can you be empathetic towards women who are trying so hard to destroy someone's life? But I'm just thinking that Evan Rachel Wood does come across quite disturbed and quite, I would say, irrational at times. So I'm at a point now where I just feel like there's not much rationality and sanity backing up a lot of these stories anymore. It's like she's pulling things out of thin air, like making stories up on the spot a lot of the time. So I do think these are quite disturbed people at various levels. So should we maybe, and I'm not accusing you specifically,
No.
but do you think that there's maybe more space for empathy in these conversations?
I don't know. I wrestle with that a lot. I've been watching, and not just in regard to this particular situation, but I've been watching the Jeffrey Dahmer series on Netflix. And one of the things that the series does effectively is it ping pongs back and forth between making you feel empathy for Jeffrey Dahmer as someone who's tortured, and by some definition, insane. And then sympathy for his victims who, and then their families who went through all this stuff. And I don't know I don't know how to square the circle of expressing empathy for someone, even while they are on a campaign of destruction against another person. And I don't know how to sort all of that out. I think maybe one thing that you could be getting at here in terms, because when you say should we have more empathy, then what that makes me ask is, okay, what changes in our behavior would that, how would that empathy manifest itself? Because it's, you know, a feeling is one thing. Like we can all say, oh, it's sad that Evan Rachel Wood is messed up, but what does that change? I suppose it could mean less sort of snarkiness, less of an emphasis on the comedy or the ridiculousness of the situation, or less of a caricaturing these women as just being these, you know, manipulative women out for a quick buck or some fame, right? Except I do think that those things are also kind of true. I think it's all mixed in there, and that's where it gets so crazy, right? Like Evan Rachel Wood, she is disturbed, and it's probably not her fault. I think she's been through some abuse in her life early on. But and those parents, I don't think did a good job with her. And I think all the theater stuff kind of messed her up. But at the same time, I do also think that she has been on a relentless campaign of destruction against this man. It's not just like she's saying some shit. Like she is making the rounds trying to do, you know, like for instance, this podcast. I think the only reason she's on this podcast is because it was one more way that she could really twist in the knife. So I don't know what to make of her. I just don't. And then therefore I don't know what to make of how to feel about her any more than Amber Heard, really, you know? What do you think? Like how do you think that would change our approach if we had more empathy?
No, I think you summed up my dilemma very well. I just sometimes, I don't know, I'm not happy about people really making fun of her in nasty ways. I believe in freedom of speech. Everyone should
No, I
be
know.
obviously, as long as they don't incite violence. But yeah, I see some stuff online that makes me a bit uncomfortable, and I might have been guilty of that in the past as well. My all-time most engaged with tweet is one that I posted after the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, and it's a picture of Amber Heard and Evan Rachel Wood, the famous picture of the two of them, and Amber's face is crossed out, the red cross, and then there's a line saying that one bitch down, one more to go. And that tweet got like 1 million impressions and hundreds of comments calling me a misogynist and reporting it and trying to get me banned. And you know, I never
Wow, I didn't
deleted
even know that was going on. Wow. Okay.
I never deleted it, but I might not have done it again. You know, I'm gonna stand by it now because it's out there anyway. But
Well,
yeah.
I look, this is a really great, this is actually a sort of a deeper, like more sort of philosophical question that goes even beyond this particular situation, which is the stuff, the things that social media rewards and that the things that get the most clicks or the most views tend to be the more, is the term uh, pugilistic, like a boxer, right? And I've noticed the same thing when I put out videos that are just really like where I'm like an attack dog, right? People like to see that. They like to see you like getting in the trenches and getting after someone or giving someone that whooping, that verbal whooping that people think they deserve. And that came up a lot with Amber Heard, right? I mean, Amber Heard has received a lot more, I think, lampooning and criticism than Evan Rachel Wood has. And at the same time, these women got into a super aggressive game. When you're considering, and let this be a lesson to the women out there who are thinking about doing this stuff, when you are considering going after a man in this way, legally trying to get the police, trying to drum up a campaign where the police will arrest him and take away his liberty, where you're trying to destroy his reputation and make the rounds of doing publicity and all of that, and you're posting on Instagram and all that, to me, that is such an obvious provocation that it's hard for me to feel like we can answer that with just a sort of like turn the other cheek, which I know is not what you're saying, but it's a hard one.